7 Things highly intelligent people only do when they're alone. Psychologists who study solitude keep finding the same thing. Being alone isn't one experience, it's 3. And only one of them is tied to anything good. It isn't shyness. It isn't avoidance. It's a quiet, deliberate choice, the kind that's been linked to creativity, not loneliness. Most people can't tell which one they're living in. Highly intelligent people can. Tonight, 7 things deep thinkers do when they're alone that separate them from everyone else, and none of them are what you'd guess. There's a man I think about often. Call him Julian, a retired architect, somewhere in his 60s, who spends most evenings alone at a drafting table, sketching by hand. His neighbors read it as sadness. A widower, the lights low, no company. They feel sorry for him. But Julian isn't grieving the quiet. He's using it. He told me once that he doesn't solve a problem at that table. He waits for the room to speak first. For years, people mistook his stillness for loneliness. It was the opposite. It was the most productive hour of his day. Some details have been changed for privacy. Julian is drawn from patterns I've seen across many people I've known. So here's the first thing. They don't rush to resolve. They take one question and let it stay open. Most people treat an unanswered question like an itch. Deep thinkers treat it like a seed. They'd rather sit in not knowing than reach for a cheap answer. If that one landed, tap the like. It tells the algorithm to show this to the next person who thinks this way. And there's a reason it pays off at the level of the brain. The moment you stop taking in input, no screen, no conversation, a network switches on. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, first mapped by Marcus Reichel back in 2001. For years, they thought it was the brain idling. It isn't. It's the brain quietly building, pulling up memory, rehearsing the future, stitching together who you are. Most people never let it run. If you've stayed this far, you already know you're the kind of person who finishes the argument in your own head before you ever say it out loud. That's who I make these for. Subscribe, and the next one finds you next week. Now, the one almost nobody admits to. Here's the second. Alone, they argue against their own conclusions. Not out of doubt, out of rigor. They reach a position, then quietly try to take it apart before they trust it. In a room full of people, that can look like hesitation. Inside their own head, it's the opposite. It's the work most people skip entirely. They've stress-tested the idea from 3 sides before anyone else has finished forming one. That's not indecision. That's a mind that refuses to be lazy with itself. The third is quieter and easy to misread. They step away on purpose to reset, not to escape. There's a difference, and it matters. A 2018 paper in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found something small but real. When people choose to be alone, it turns down the volume on high-intensity emotion. The spikes settle. The noise drops. That's the key word chosen. Solitude forced on you feels like punishment. Solitude you reach for feels like air. Deep thinkers learn this early. After a day that's too loud, too crowded, they don't push through it. They retreat and come back sharper. Now I want to stop and push back on something the world keeps getting wrong. You've been told that pulling away from people is a problem. Antisocial. A warning sign. They were wrong, and there's research that says so. In 2017, the psychologist Julie Bowker published a study in the journal Personality and Individual Differences. She split social withdrawal into 3 kinds: shyness pulling back out of fear, avoidance pulling back out of dislike, and a third kind she called unsociability, pulling back simply because you value the time alone. Here's the part nobody tells you. The first 2 carry real costs. The third one didn't. In her study, unsociability wasn't tied to anxiety or depression at all, and it was the only kind linked to higher creativity. So when they called your quiet a defect, they were describing the wrong kind. The research calls yours the one that actually builds something. Nothing here is a clinical diagnosis. If solitude ever tips into something that hurts, please reach out to a licensed therapist. Number 4 is the one nobody admits to. On something undemanding, a walk. The dishes, a long drive, they let the mind wander. On purpose. Here's where it gets interesting. Some research, including a 2012 study in psychological science, suggests that letting the mind drift during a simple task can help ideas incubate the answer surfacing while you're busy with something else. Scientists still argue about how strong that effect really is, but anyone who thinks for a living knows the feeling. Think back to Julian. He told me his hardest problems never broke at the drafting table. They broke on the walk home half a mile in, no destination. The question loosening with every step. He'd stop on the sidewalk and write a line on the back of his hand. You don't think the idea up, you let it arrive. The catch most people miss: you have to be a little bored for it to work. The downside: of course, your best idea always shows up in the shower. Never in the meeting where you actually needed it. Never with a pen within reach. The fifth looks like a flaw. It isn't. Alone. They replay things, conversations, decisions, old moments, and turn them over. To most people, that sounds exhausting. But there's a line between replaying to learn and replaying to punish yourself. That same self-building network, the one that runs when the room goes quiet, is the machinery behind it. It takes scattered events and assembles them into a story that makes sense. Deep thinkers aren't stuck in the past. They're mining it. They go back over the evening not to relive the sting of it, but to pull the lesson out. The difference is direction. One loop ends with something learned. The other just spins. Notice it right now. When a room finally goes quiet, when the last notification stops, your shoulders drop a little. Your breath gets longer. That isn't boredom setting in. That's your system finally getting the bandwidth back. 6 follows straight from 5. They guard their time alone without apologizing for it. Remember Bowker's 3 kinds. Once you understand that wanting time alone isn't fear and isn't dislike, that it's its own healthy thing, you stop treating a quiet evening as something you owe anyone an explanation for. The hour gets blocked out. The phone goes face down. And they don't justify to themselves or to anyone else why tonight they'd rather be in their own company. That's not arrogance. It's a person who finally understands their own wiring and stops apologizing for being built to think this deeply. And the 7th matters most. Alone. They make peace with their own company. Most people need a room full of noise to feel like themselves. They reach for a screen the second the silence lands. Deep thinkers can sit alone and still feel whole. Solitude stops being a waiting room and becomes a place they actually live. But here's the line that keeps all 7 honest. Solitude is not isolation. I knew a man, call him Oren, a watchmaker who lived mostly alone. But Oren had exactly 2 close friends. 2 people who knew the real him. Researchers Long and Averill drew that line back in 2003. Solitude is something you choose and grow in. Loneliness is a lack pressed on you from outside. So protect a couple of real bonds. Find your 2 people, keep them close, then guard your quiet without apology. 3 things you can actually try this week, all grounded in what we just covered. 1. The 1-question evening. Pick a single question that matters to you. Sit with it for 10 minutes. Don't solve it. Let the room speak first. 2. The reflection test. When you catch yourself replaying something, ask one thing. Am I learning, or am I just looping? If you've gone around more than twice, write the thought down and stop there. 3. The walk with no input. 20 minutes. No headphones. No phone. Let the mind wander on purpose, and notice what surfaces. None of these take talent. They take permission to spend an hour inside your own head and call it productive. Here's the thing I want you to leave with tonight. For most of your life, someone has hinted there's something off about the way your mind works. Too quiet, too inward, too much time spent alone. There isn't. The silence isn't isolation, it's bandwidth. The depth isn't a flaw to fix. And being at home in your own company isn't something to outgrow, it's the thing most people never learn. You're the proof the world still has room for minds that go this deep and come back carrying something worth the trip. And if any of these 7 felt like they were written about you, they were. Subscribe, and the next one's already waiting. Then do one thing. In the comments, tell me the number 1 to 7 that you already do when no one's watching. I read every single one. That's honestly where I learn the most. On the screen now, 2 videos that go deeper into what we talked about tonight. One picks up exactly where this one leaves off. Pick whichever speaks to you. I'll see you in the next one.